using the Save for Web dialog box in Illustrator. When we save for the web, what happens is optimization, and this is a process which the file size is reduced through different color compression algorithms. So Illustrator really tries to offer some options for saving the artwork in different web graphic file formats. To navigate to our Save for Web dialog box, we need to go to our File menu and choose Save for Web. This is our Save for Web dialog box. A couple of items to pay attention to. We have some unique tools just for this dialog box. We have a hand tool which will allow us to move around our artwork within our window. We have a slice selection tool which allows us to select a slice. You can see that it does have a faint highlight around the slice when it is selected. We have a zoom in tool or zoom out, an eyedrop tool, eyedropper color, and then toggle the slice's visibility. Up at the top we have our original. Then we have an optimized view and we have a 2-up view, and the 2-up view shows us our original along with what we are attempting to optimize and how visually that may be changing. When I use my hand tool here to navigate, notice they both work together because it's just a different view of the same thing. At the bottom left, we have a preview button which we will go to in a moment, and that will preview this in the default browser. I also have some color information here. Probably the easiest to see is if I go over top of my flower here. Notice how I get my RGB values. I also have an alpha value, which if I go in an area here where there's some transparency, you might be able to pick up on some of that alpha being less. You notice in the middle here it is 0. And then I also have a hex number, and then if there was index. Now if I go up to my black here, you can see the hex number are all zeros. My RGB is 000. If I go down to this white area here, there's actually a white area around this button because of the slight shadow effect. You can see that their hex number is all Fs and my RGB is 255, 255, 255. So on the right side here, I get my estimates here, my presets, I should say, for ways that I can optimize this. So I have a slice selected. I need to make sure I have a slice selected. I'll stay with the 2-up view so you can see how this will change. And my options here are a GIF, a JPEG, and a PNG. So the GIF is a standard file format for compressing images, but with flat color. So what a GIF does, or how it works, is it lowers the number of colors in the file. The max is 255. Now if I click on this, 255, I'm sorry, click on the GIF, 256 because it's 0 to 255. So 256 total colors there. You can see that maybe it gets a little bit less crisp, I guess you could say, because in this slice there is a picture that has continuous tones. A note, GIFs are usually not used in photos because of the quality or how GIF reduces and compresses. So if the number of colors gets too low, then my problem areas become very obvious. So what I'm doing is choosing the different algorithm here. We call it the different palettes that I can choose to use in my GIF. What it's doing is it's indexing my color. So like I said, the colors, there's a max from 0 to 255, which gives you 256 colors. I can type in my number, or you can just go with kind of a reduction here of some of the set standards. So notice my color table here now only has 16 colors. I do get transparency in here. But notice how this really starts to look kind of crummy. It's getting some dithering happening, and dithering amount is right here, 100% dither. And what dither does is it attempts to produce a color by putting two different colors next to one another. So in a very broad sense, I could put yellow and red next to each other in a checkerboard pattern, and from a distance you may think it's orange. So that's how that dithering works. So if I'm working with flat art, if I were to go over here and use my my GIF on this flat artwork here, I'll select this slice, see all of the colors, and you can actually see a little bit of repetition here. So I could go down and I could really reduce my colors without any quality change. I went from 256 down to 64, didn't really see a change. Now I'm down to 32, I didn't see a change again. Let me use my hand here to zoom so you can see all of the colors in this area. So I can keep walking it down and I'm not seeing any kind of a change. This area here may be getting a little bit darker, but it's still very much acceptable. It still is crisp. So this is where we excel with our GIF. So most cases you're not going to show any loss of detail, and really it's kind of the how low can we go, because the lower we go, the smaller the file size will be. So if you look here in the bottom corner where I have my cursor, the original has 3 megs. My GIF compressed right here, 10.7. So I was able to reduce the size quite a bit. 100% dither, selective palette, 16 colors. You know, I might even be able to push this down to 8. Well, now I lost my my circle here, and you can see the stem gets a little bit. So I could eventually walk this back up to get my colors right there. So I could go with 12, and that would be okay. Now you notice too in this transparent area I'm having some issues as well. So depending if that's acceptable to you or not, we'll have to probably walk that up. Actually 13 I think took care of it in the most part. So that's the GIFs. Now I'm going to navigate to my JPEGs. JPEGs are, like I said, for continuous color. This one, if I select this with my selection tool, you'll notice that it is a GIF, so you can see how really crummy it gets. Now let's use the slice right next door here, and in this case let's choose a JPEG. So JPEG, you may notice right away, it does not support that transparency. JPEG uses a lossy algorithm, which means I do lose data, and that data is selectively discarded. So it's kind of like, you know, randomly I'm going to throw out pixels that I don't want to remember. So a JPEG is good for any kind of continuous tone, gradients, blends, usually photographs. We definitely want to look at a JPEG. We do have an amount that we can compress. So we have a high JPEG, a maximum JPEG. Now between my maximum and my high, I'm not really noticing any difference here. I can go all the way down to a low, and now I can start seeing some of this you know, kind of ghosting, shadowing, pixelization happening around the petals in that area. So depending on what your level of you know, how much you're going to accept, at what level are you at. So I'm going to choose high here. Again, you can see that my JPEG is weighted a little bit higher. I'm at 6.874 kilobytes, so it's much higher than what my GIF was. And that level of how much I'm going to compress it is noted in my quality. So I could have very high quality. Look at, I jump up to 19K. If I go to lower quality, so the lower I go on my quality, basically the more the file size is reduced and I'm losing detail. Look at, now I'm down to 4. So, you know, this one actually might be okay. So the higher the quality, the more detail is preserved, the higher my file size. The lower the quality, the less detail is preserved, and the smaller my file size. So again, it's kind of where is your acceptance level at. Okay. So that's the JPEG. The last one we have here is in terms of file formats. Oops, let's go back. I'm going to keep this one as a JPEG actually, and let's select this last one here. Notice I can use my space bar to move with my hand as well, so don't have to navigate up to that hand tool. So let's select this very first image here, and we'll choose ping. So we have a ping 8 and we have a ping 24. And the ping 8, basically it's a portable network graphic. So as I was saying, as far as the file formats go, a ping is the newest one. He's the newbie. And so it's a bitmap file format, but it supports the lossless data compression. lossless. So that means that we're not lossy like the JPEG. It was created as an improvement over the GIF, and it was designed for the internet. It was designed for transferring images through the internet. So it supports the RGB mode, but it also has the option of supporting transparency. Notice I have transparency on here. When it's off, this fills in with the background color. So we can get transparency, which really makes pings be a very valuable file option here. Okay, and so then again, I can play with my colors. Notice this looks very similar to what we see in our GIF. So I can reduce the colors, and again, this is looking fairly good with that limited number of colors. Okay, now once I have all of this, and I'm now ready to see kind of how is this all going to work. What I'm going to do with no selections here, you can see that my original was at 3 megs. This one's at 41.93 kilobytes. So I've reduced the size pretty good. I'm going to do the preview button right down here, the bottom left, preview. And what this will do is it will preview this in my default browser, so I can see. Notice that this first one I had reduced. This is a GIF actually with a very large reduction in color. You can see how I lose that continuous tone smoothness to it. The other two I would say are fairly acceptable. My flower, fairly acceptable. Don't even know that the colors have been reduced. And then here's my HTML. So it gives me all of this information that I can use. If I'm back to my Save for Web Dialog Box, I also then can choose to export whether I want to do all of the user slices, only the selected slices, or all of the slices. I'll choose all of the slices, and I'll choose to save it. When I save it, I navigate to the folder where I want it to go. I'll make a new folder here called Class Example, and I'll put this in the Class Example folder, and I'll choose Save. And now if we navigate back to that folder, here it is. This is what I get. I get a folder with images, and inside, if you look closely here, I have some GIFs. Those are my empty, non-defined slices. My flower was actually sliced into 2 pieces here. Not so good, but you can see that I've got some GIFs. Here's the ping, here is the JPEG, and here is the GIF as far as those 3 images go. So the slices are saved out individually with my defined optimization. So now I have all of the pieces. I can put my pieces back together to form my web page.